Welcome to An Unconventional Life, a podcast where we share stories about the crazy 1% out there who earned their doctoral degrees and then went on to use them in crazy, cool, unique, and unconventional ways. Here's your host, astrophysicist turned teacher, author, dissertation coach, and more, Dr. Russell Strickland.
Hello, this is Dr. Russell Strickland, the founder and CEO of Dissertation Done, and your host for An Unconventional Life podcast. Today, I have with me Dr. Orbé-Austin. She's a licensed psychologist, executive coach, an author, TEDx speaker, and more. We're going to get into it here soon. Dr. Orbé-Austin, welcome. Thanks for coming here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome. I want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by Dissertation Done. If you are an adult doctoral student and you are getting ready to start working on your dissertation or embroiled in the battle right now, feel free to reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/done. And we'll see if you might be a good fit for our Fast Track Your Dissertation coaching program, where we get our students through the dissertation process, usually in about a year or so, but definitely saving you years off your time to graduation. And if by any chance you've already won the battle and you're a doctor and out there operating in that expert space, and you would really like to expand your authority and credibility, the best way to do that is by becoming a published author. And we take folks from the blank page to becoming an expert published author in less time than you would think possible. And we do that in a way that's strategically designed to help you grow your impact and authority. So you can check us out at dissertationdone.com/book, fill out a little contact form, and we'll get in touch and see if you're a good fit for that. So that's the commercial. Dr. Orbé-Austin, I am so excited to have you here today. And again, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. So I'm excited to have this conversation.
So I often will start off by asking folks, tell us a little bit about why you made that decision to jump into a doctoral degree program. It's a decision that 98% of the population doesn't make. So yep. We're the crazy ones out here to do that. What was your particular reason why?
I think the reason I pursued a PhD was because I was in a master's program in the field. I was in a counseling master's program. And at the time, these master's programs had just become license eligible.
Okay.
And as a result of that, there weren't a lot of states that were accepting the license or actually had the process to become licensed. And some of the states that had it, I wasn't necessarily interested in living in. And so I started to think about what were my other options if I couldn't become licensed, or in some cases it was hard to become licensed because the process wasn't all that solidified.
Right.
So I thought I'd have to pursue the PhD and get licensed as a psychologist to practice, or to have the ability to practice without being so encumbered by the newness of the license. And so that's what kind of drove me to apply for a PhD program.
I think that's a completely unique story, that earning your PhD was the path of least resistance.
Little did I know it was going to be a lot worse than I thought, but yes, at the time I thought it was going to be that way.
So yeah, we all go into this with the best intentions, right? And we have all these successes behind us, but a lot of us end up hitting a bit of a stumbling block at some point. Did this experience ever throw up any roadblocks for you, or any challenges you weren't expecting?
Of course it did. It did. And I think, because I had gone to a master's program, I was able to bring in like 30 credits into my doctoral program, and coursework had never been my issue. So I cruised through my coursework. Our programs are a little different in psychology. Our programs are what we call, sometimes considered 2 PhDs. And so we have like a clinical kind of component to our PhD and a research component to our PhD. Right. So typically on average, our programs take around 5. It's purported to be 5 years, but in American Psychological Association, they say it's the average of 7. Actually, the programs say 5, but it's actually accurately 7. And so
folks who are going into doctoral programs heed those words. It's always the programs say one thing,
and then the data says something different. Look at the data.
Yeah,
the data's real. And so I thought, the program said 5, I could get out in 5, and maybe even quicker, because I was able to get 30 credits. That gave me 1 year. I cruised through the rest of my coursework. I was done probably by second year. I had finished all my coursework and was ready to start my dissertation. My particular advisor had a very messed up process around how to begin the dissertation process. He would not discuss your topic with you. You had 3 chapters written, which is kind of crazy, because once you
talk to you about it until you had 3 chapters written.
Yes, he would have one little conversation with you about the topic itself, and usually a very kind of discouraging conversation. Like, I don't think it's a good idea. No matter what it was never a good idea, because I talked to other people who had these conversations with him. You get one conversation and then you have to produce these 3 chapters. And so that's a really daunting thing for someone who's never done a dissertation before. And I felt like I didn't want to lose the time or momentum. So, because I didn't even get to start my dissertation. We had a dissertation advisement like class, but I wasn't eligible to start it till the following year. And I was like, I don't want to lose time. So I got, some support from another faculty member who kind of in secret met with me and helped me to put it together, because she felt it was also a messed up, cruel process. And so she helped me put these 3 chapters together. And it was able to produce the first 3 chapters for the conversation with him prior to even beginning my dissertation. So I was a 3rd year and I had my first 3 chapters done. And when I gave it to him, he was shocked, because he clearly didn't know I was getting the help on the side to think about how to do it. Yeah. And I think he thought it was going to take me a lot longer, which it should have, and I remember turning it to him, be so proud of being so excited that I was on track to finish in the way that I wanted to. And it took him I think it was 2 months to get me the first set of comments back. Yeah. And the first set of comments was so devastating, because I looked through the entire document and all he corrected was the demonstrative pronouns. Literally all the corrections were with this, that, these, and those. And there was no substantive comments on the material. So it was frightening, because I knew in that moment, even as a naive 3rd year doctoral student, that this was going to bode for a very long process, and that I was in trouble. And so, my dissertation was the hardest part of my doctoral career. And it was a very rocky road that eventually led to me leaving my advisor and having to be assigned a new advisor. My new advisor was fantastic. It was kind of a little scary also going to my new advisor. I was the first, he was a new faculty member. I was the first dissertation he was ever working on. Other than his own. Yeah. But so it was nerve-wracking. He didn't know the process as well in terms of all the administrative, getting the outside reader and all this other administrative stuff. I had to figure out a lot of it on my own, which I was pretty resourceful at doing. But all of that time, I told you I was able to finish by the 3rd year. I didn't get out of my doctoral program until I was a 7th year. So
when did you start with the new advisor? How long did that take to?
I started with the new advisor my 5th year.
So about 2 years with the new advisor then?
Yeah, it took me 2 years with the new advisor to get through. Yeah.
Yeah, so lots of lessons there. I mean, we certainly hear from everyone, well, almost everyone, that the classes are fairly straightforward and fairly easy. And the analogy I always tell folks is that your last doctoral class is much more similar to classes you were taking in 4th and 5th grade than it is to your dissertation, because
it's kind of true.
It's kind of like,
simple. Yeah, they were easy. Yeah. They weren't hard. They were less hard than undergrad in a lot of ways. And I got the materials. I took the we had a certification exam in order to be ready. I took the certification exam, killed it, did amazingly well in certification exam when most of my classmates failed it. Wow. And I was doing well, but then this process where I wasn't in control of all, clearly I'm not in control of the way that it turns around and all that kind of stuff. It really slowed me down. And I had a very powerful advisor and I couldn't get help. To the point where I actually went to the dean of my program to tell him what was happening and ask him for help, the dean of my college, actually. Right. And he told me to stand up and to get out of his office and that we never had this conversation. And so
because of the power that
yes, that my professor wielded. Yeah.
The advisor. Yeah. This all smacks of very old school, traditional academia, politics, all of this sort of thing. He probably has this notion of he's going to stand guard on the doors of the ivory tower, and you have to knock him down.
Yeah. That was exactly what it was. It was
exactly. If you're good enough to do that, you deserve it. And if you're not,
then you stay. Yeah, you stay here. He had some students that were 20 years, 25th years, insane, disgusting kind of things.
You wonder at some point when someone gets the hint, right?
Yeah, I think I think
where am I going to have if I'm 20 years into my doctoral degree program?
Yeah, and they just keep going. I don't know. They just don't want to give up. And I think you're right. I was at Columbia, so it was the Ivy League, and right. This idea of kind of that he held a throne, and and he was only going to allow certain people through the throne. And it was just, no matter how competent they actually were to complete the thing, he was going to decide who was or was not going to move forward, or at what pace they were going to move forward.
And so incredibly, incredibly important piece of information here is, if you have at your school, at your program, the ability to choose your advisor, do your research and ask people, how long are they advised by this person? Well, it depends on what you're interested in, right? Most of the students that I serve want to get graduation as soon as possible. They have other things. They're not going to stay in academia per se. And so what their advisor thinks of them or anything else is irrelevant so long as their dissertation is approved. That's the level at which they need to care. And so if that's you, then make sure that you're choosing an advisor whose actions and hopefully attitudes are consistent with your goals. If you want a spot in academia and, Dr. All-Star is going to be able to secure your next position in the field, then by all means, you have to deal with Dr. All-Star. Most likely, at least that's one path, but be clear on your intentions, be clear on your goals, be clear on your objectives, and make sure that you are managing your doctoral experience so that it aligns with those goals.
And make sure, too, I think you're totally accurate on all of those points. And I think also to make sure that Dr. All-Star has had a history of putting other faculty members into other institutions, because a lot of them look like they can and they talk like they can, and then when you look at your recent grads and where they're at, they're not doing it. And so I think it's really important that they actually show you with evidence that they're actually doing it, that you can see.
And again, just know what your goals are, know what your intentions are, and then make sure that you are, as you put it, checking off the boxes that the path that you're taking is a proven path to get to your goals. So if you want that person to put you in a faculty position, has he put others?
Don't think of yourself as an exception. Don't think of, I can do this differently. I can do it. I'm the one who's going to get, no, you're going to get through on the average of everyone else.
Exactly right.
And not let hubris get in the way.
Talked about is smarter than any other doctoral student. And they don't realize that every other, you're now talking about doctoral students. You're not talking about everyone anymore. So you've got to remember that, you're probably going to be, in general, you're going to be the average doctoral student.
And that there are parts of the process that are out of your control. And so you really have to understand how those function with the particular person you're going to work with. I mean, I was told, I think that, our particular program followed the old English method of PhDs. You get assigned an advisor, they determine the future of your life and the trajectory. And so, figure out sort of what, and believe people when they tell you, if they tell you something hard and you don't want to listen to it, listen to them.
Yeah, if you talk to one of your, Dr. All-Star's current students and they're like, I can't talk about him.
Then listen to that.
That means something.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So the process can be daunting. The process can and is not entirely in your control in some cases. So depending on how early you are into your doctoral journey, look into that and figure out how much you can control. You'll be happier the more. Talking to
my
a psychologist
husband,
here, the higher your locus of control is.
Yes, exactly.
So
my husband had a great advisor. He had a very different, much smoother process. He had a very, but he also got out.
What are you complaining about? This is easy.
He had a blast. I mean, his advisor was fantastic, and he had a very different experience.
And that's so, and so that experience does depend often on your degree program, your institution, and your
your advisor.
Absolutely. Okay, so once you started with this other advisor and you were really making true progress, so now you didn't have someone literally standing in your way and trying to keep you from progressing. At that point, did things move smoothly, or were there still some obstacles that you had to overcome?
I mean, I think things moved really, to be honest, it didn't move completely smoothly because my advisor threatened to sue me, and as my dissertation being part of his intellectual property, because I had passed already my proposal hearing. And I'd also passed my data hearing with him. We have a proposal, data, and then defense. So I had passed the proposal hearing with him. So he said that my work was his intellectual property. Meanwhile, he hated my work. And so he threatened.
And the philosophy of the dissertation is that it is the student's work. So in academia, you are often doing your professor's work for some period of time. And sometimes I had the experience of writing papers and the professor's name goes on the paper. Then my name goes on with his. Then his goes on with mine.
Right.
And then,
That's lovely.
then you get your name on your own paper, which is often your dissertation might be the first time that happens.
That's the healthy academic experience,
Yeah.
but that's not what I had. Because then he threatened, and then he threatened.
Property is just inconsistent with
Yeah.
the philosophy of the dissertation. He's
Yes.
saying that's your work.
And he's saying it was his work.
Right.
So what happened was the administrators at the college decided with my advisor, who they had assigned to me. He was forced to take me on because this guy would have demolished anyone who took me on voluntarily.
Mhm.
He was told that if I could proceed with him on the same dissertation. He wanted me to start over. That was what he was trying to do. He was trying to sabotage me to start all over again. He said, the administrators decided that I could continue on the work that I had been continuing on if when I published it, his name was on it. And that he didn't get off because he was off the committee, didn't get off the publication.
Wow.
And I said, over my dead body, will I ever publish this dissertation?
Oh.
So like I never published it, and I never intended
Okay.
to publish it, so that I would make sure that I never had to include him on anything.
So you agreed with their stipulation and then silently like, I just won't publish it.
Exactly. That's what I did. And
Yeah.
then my advisor was fantastic, and he really was incredibly supportive. It was an incredibly different experience. I was able to we have to do an internship, an APA approved internship,
Right.
kind of like medical students. And I finished my dissertation while on internship, which is pretty unheard of because it can be a very intense experience, being on internship because you're working in a hospital and you're having to spend time on your research on the weekends. So, but I was able to finish it, and I was able to defend at the end of that year that I finished my internship, thanks to my advisor, who carried me through a really complicated data hearing where my chair of my data hearing was a statistician, which is not easy. But it was fantastic. We did really well, and and then defend. And it was a very lovely celebratory experience. And he took me through that, and it was very reparative.
And that is so good. I hear occasionally people saying that their defense was, a difficult process. And certainly if you had been stuck with your original advisor, I bet you that defense would still have been a difficult
Probably.
process.
Yes.
But I think there's some benefit to being challenged in this process, because certainly if you stay in academia, you will be challenged at some point in your career. And
I was challenged, but nothing that felt unfair, like especially in my data hearing. Like not in my defense so much.
That final, okay, now I'm defending. This should be like your committee signed off on your work, and they know what your work is. And unless you stand up there and you can't speak English anymore,
right? And you're burnt, so you're so badly burnt you can't do anything. But I think the questions were fantastic in my defense. They were really thought-provoking. They helped me think about where the data and the research was going next, things like that. It was very collegial and collaborative, and I think I loved that. My data hearing was challenging. It was questioning the stats I ran, the results, the tables. That was much more challenging. But got through it. But I think I got through it because I was really supported with a fantastic, advisor who really
having that support
cared.
is huge. Yeah. And then when you mentioned that the word you used with your defense was collegial, and that's a point that a lot of doctoral students don't grasp as they're in the doctoral experience, is that when you graduate, you're a doctor. In this defense, you should be talking almost at a peer level.
Yeah.
Obviously, these guys are still kind of supervisors because they have to sign off on your work.
Yeah.
But it should feel, they will know that you're ready if they feel like they were talking to a peer. If you were not intimidated and you were not deferential, but you were here and this is my work and this is what we said. And if someone disagrees with you, feel free to, give it right back to them.
Yeah.
Just know what you're talking about. That's all.
Yeah, in a collegial way. And it actually, like, things came out of that defense. Like, out of that defense, people wanted me to work on collaborating on grants with them. And so it was a really lovely, fantastic experience. It ended really well, but it started very traumatically.
Now, coming out of that experience, I know you've done all sorts of wonderful things. So I want to talk a little bit about, the experience of building a new business for your practice, because that's really what it is. A lot of experts think about, I'm building a practice, I'm helping other people, and they don't think about it in that way of I'm also building a business. And I know you've had some success with that. Your TEDx talk, your book. Tell me what came next after you sort of crossed that stage, either literally or metaphorically.
So what came next was like a mental collapse, where I really kind of just totally messed up. Like I just was so burnt out after all that experience in the 7 years there, that I just had lost a lot of confidence. And I was struggling with imposter syndrome. And I made some, like, they were fine choices. They weren't like bad. They weren't great choices for me where I could go, but I was very insecure and I was in a very kind of like questioning place of my skills. And I ended up in a really bad job that had nothing to do with being a psychologist. And I had a really toxic boss. I talk about this in my TEDx talk. And in that experience, that toxic boss, he was harassing me. He made me feel, he would humiliate me publicly and kind of like, ask me why there's no hot coffee. I was training professors on how to teach. That was my job. In unconventional ways. I was teaching them kind of how to think about using math with context and all these different things. But the job was somewhat interesting, but the way he treated me was like as if I was there to serve coffee. And it was really quite embarrassing and really rough. And eventually, I struggled to leave the job. I struggled to believe I deserved more, that I could really start a practice or do anything for myself. And then I was in a meeting with him. We had an all-female senior staff, and there was music playing. And someone asked, "What is this music that you're playing?" And he said, "It's music to soothe the savage breast." And in that one moment, I just like the lights went on. And I was like, what am I doing here? How am I taking this degree I worked so hard for and like just throwing it down the tubes? Like, I'm letting this get treated. I just like had this momentary like life flash before me experience. And I decided I was going to quit the job on the spot. No 2 weeks notice, nothing. I cleared my office out. I, quit the job on Monday. He threatened my career in academia, said I would never work in academics again. He would make sure of it. It was really, really awful. And I think in that, I always say, like, I don't remember going home. I remember my footsteps walking on the linoleum outside of his office because I was so like heightened. But all I remember is being in my living room, walking in a circle, having like a panic attack, and figuring out what did I just do? What my career's over, and and all this like stuff. And my husband said, just give yourself some room to breathe. Give yourself some time. You'll have a job in no time. Don't think about it. And within 2 weeks, I had another job in a academic setting, actually within the same academic institution, not the same college, but in another college within the same system. And it was making,
they probably knew a little bit about this other guy.
Yeah, well, my new boss was best friends with my advisor there. I had another job in this institution, and I was able to tell her the truth about what happened because she knew my former advisor and could trust me. And I got this grad job. I was making more in 3 days than I was making full time at that other job. And then I decided I want to craft my own future. Yes. I need to think about it came from my husband sort of suggesting I get going on. And I over those 2 years or 3 years that I was working at that college, I never got my license. I didn't pursue anything to move myself forward. My husband said, study for your licensing exam now that you're part-time, think about what you want for your business. Let's move this thing forward. And I just felt like, yes, let's do this. And I just started to I started to read like crazy, different books about the business of private practice, not just the clinical piece, the business of private practice. I wanted to set up good accounting practices and good business practices and good marketing practices. And I really just invested in learning, becoming a PhD student of business.
Right.
My father used to always say, higher ed is about learning how to learn. And I think one thing my PhD taught me was I can become expert in anything. I just need the time.
I think that's so important. I agree with that too. College in particular, it's about learning how to learn. So many people look at that as job training. I think when you're going to get a PhD or an advanced degree, a master's level degree or something, that becomes a lot more about job training. Hopefully we're going to enhance some of those critical reasoning skills and thinking skills. But yeah, higher ed is really, learning how to learn. You
learn all these skills about learning. Yeah, and becoming
an expert in anything. That's awesome.
Yep. And I just started to learn about the business. And I wanted to, a lot of my colleagues, older colleagues were advising me, don't do it the way I did it. I made a lot of mistakes. I just thought about the clinical work. I didn't think about the business. And so I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to craft a plan to kind of do this. And we really focused on doing amazing clinical work in the hour, but having a business that supported it. In terms of having real marketing practices, real ways of being visible in the field as clinicians and not as professors. We really thought about how to do this really as a business and not as almost like a hobby. Even though it's not a hobby, you're really doing work, but you kind of don't think of it. You never want to associate business with the actual practice.
I think there's something to do with that word that so many experts use for their business practice. I think there's something in there where again, you don't treat it entirely seriously like a business as you were putting it. You're good at your practice and you're trying to do a good job in your practice, but it's not practice. It's like real. You
Yeah, it's
are a
real.
pro.
Yes. Yeah,
So
and you don't let yourself acknowledge that without the formalities of really doing it as a business,
right.
And so, yeah, I think that's what we took. And then my practice grew to the point where I was able to leave my part-time job. And then it took another growth spurt later. My husband was able to leave his full-time job.
Yeah.
And then both became, because he's also a psychologist. And so we then both, ran the business from that point on full-time.
That's awesome. So what were you mentioned, accounting and marketing and some of these other things. What do you think was the most critical thing that you needed to focus on to really make the business successful, above and beyond just being a good psychologist?
Yeah. I mean, I think the piece around sort of taking it seriously as a business was important, that like foundational concept.
Mhm.
And I think then the other thing that I think has been really critical is really developing really good marketing skills. And so and those are really hard. It's a very amorphous field. Like it seems really concrete, but it is not. And it's
Right.
constantly changing. And so you really have to invest in kind of really learning the craft of marketing and how it's shifting with social and all those things. So that has been really critical for me. One of the best things I ever did for my business was actually, I wanted to teach other clinicians how to develop the business of private practice, right? Private practice. And I developed this workshop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very needed skill set. A lot of
Yeah.
people do that.
And I developed this workshop and I felt like we could not preach it unless we practiced it. So I literally, everything I preached in the thing, we did.
Yeah.
And then nobody came to the training. Like I had to let people come for free because nobody would pay for it.
Wow.
But in doing that, in prepping for that training, we did a bunch of things, but one of the things I did was we revamped our entire website, hired a bunch of people to work on it and made it SEO optimized. And it blew our business up. And that's when my husband was able to leave his full-time job. And it was kind of really ironic that the actual thing I wanted to do with the purpose of it was mostly to prove that it's important to do it. But in essence, it really just blew our business up. So that's when I was able to kind of really both of us go full-time.
Well, I believe wholeheartedly. I mean, there are these sort of condescending little bromides out there. Those who do and those who can't teach. I think that if you want to be able to figure out how to teach it, and then you really know it. And if you really know it, then you do it. But you have to really know it first.
Yeah, it was really I never thought that I was so upset by the empty rooms and how much we spent on getting space. But I think I was so grateful 6 months later for what I had done in preparation, because it really, I don't know if I would have done it otherwise. But it was a really good thing for our practice. And so I think doing that really got me interested in SEO and marketing and really kind of staying ahead of the game when it comes to marketing our practice. So
I'll bet you that experience helped you find your voice some too, because I know you've been continuing to do these sorts of things. And one of the folks that I follow said, get out there, start talking, and be grateful for the fact that you don't have an audience at first, because you're going to be awful. You're going to be horrible. It's okay. Everybody is, but you'll find your voice and you'll find your audience, and they'll both sort of come together in an organic way. But you can't do that unless you start. So sometimes it is speaking to an empty room or a hall full of one person. So.
Yeah. I think one of the things that my husband always says is we're going to take risks in our business, but all the risks are going to have gains, even if they fail, because there's learning even in the failure. And I think some of the best moments I've had in my business have been around the failures, and that they've really been able to kind of have a piece of learning or gain that I didn't anticipate, that really just almost accidentally put me in a path that was another healthy path for us. And so
you can't course correct from a standstill. You have to
you have to be active, and you have to take risk, and not every risk pays off. And there are a lot of failure in business, and you just have to be okay with that part of the process.
So you've mentioned a few marketing principles that I'm kind of familiar with. Talk to us a little bit more about some of the other things you've done and how those fit into your business. I know you're author of a book, TEDx talk, big on social. How do those things fit into this growing your business process for you?
Yeah, I mean, they're all part of part of being visible and kind of the marketing piece of all of it.
Mhm.
But it's been, that part was very hard for me. As a psychologist, we're taught to be invisible, and
Right.
we're taught to be listeners and to, you know, to interpret, but to kind of to be our personas, our peopleness should be invisible largely and not present. So it was really hard for me to be out on LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn top voice, and I, you know, and do all these things. But the way that I did it was just taking a little bit of risk. And the way I got recognized as LinkedIn top voice was writing on LinkedIn articles. And a journalist from LinkedIn caught on to it and interviewed me for things and really liked me, and then thought you'd be great as a LinkedIn top voice. And so I think it is these little kinds of ways you push yourself to kind of to take your expertise and be visible with it, and be very flexible in sort of how you know, kind of present yourself. Don't get caught in we're going to do this. See how the audience responds to it. Start to put things out there. If they respond, keep doing more of that. If they don't respond, move on. And
I
so
think that's a very important point, but I think also it's very important to be authentic to yourself, because one of the things that happens is you attract the type of people you attract are based on the message that you put out there and the persona that you put out there. And so you better make sure it's your persona because
yeah,
if not, you're going to attract people that want to work with someone else. And you're going to have to put this face of someone else on while you're working with them, because if they see the authentic you, they're going to be like, that's not the person I connected with. So you have
yeah.
to be authentic. Yeah. Figure out what part of your message resonates. That's perfectly fine.
Yes.
That makes
But I
sense.
think also too with authenticity, I think we, especially as academics, we can get very rigid about you know, authenticity and this is what's correct about what we know. And it's you know, I think it's about being more flexible about it, because there are things that I would love to talk about, but my audience doesn't want to hear about it,
Yeah.
or the things that, you know, they're just they're not interested. But so I try to kind of be responsive.
Right.
And think about sort of how to, you know, how to find things that I know, you know, in my discipline, I know a lot. So there's a lot of things I can talk about. So it's okay for me. I'm not bothered by the fact that this doesn't go linearly in teaching you X or Y or Z. I try to be super flexible. And I think that's been helpful for me, because I think as an academic, we're taught you know, this is the correct way to do things, you know, and it can get really rigid. And I think there are a lot of correct ways to do things. And
Right.
I think that's
And we talked
healthy.
about that a little bit before we started the show today, that we teach that there's a certain way to do things in academia, but we practice a little differently. And then when we figure out how we want to do it, then we kind of do that regimented thing to make sure we're doing everything right. And so when you're finding your voice in you know, marketing your business or whatnot, there's going to be a lot of experimentation. And you're right, there's a lot of different things you can talk about in what I would consider to be an authentic way. It might not be, again, the rigid, you know, this is how you should pedagogically teach people.
Right.
But if they're attracted to this part of your message instead of that part of your message, give them what they want,
Yeah.
but give it to them in a way that's authentic to you. Don't try to be someone else while you're doing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That's a waste of time. Unless you're a great actor, it's going to be really difficult to do that. You have
And
to
even
be
if you are
very
a great
kind of
actor,
natural.
do you want to be a part that you play all the time, or do you want to be yourself? You
And
know?
some people do. Some
Yeah.
people want a public persona that isn't really them, so that there's not any kind of
It's-
connection to that. So you can choose that, but I think you got to make a choice that's sustainable for you, that long term you can
100%.
still be doing it and it feels authentic to you, even if it is, you know, some people have a persona, and when I meet them in real life, they're a little different. It's okay. You know, just make sure that it's sustainable for you. The other thing I would say is one of the things that I think was a surprise to me about sort of putting stuff out there, like putting articles on LinkedIn, or I would totally tell your audience to check out Haro. Haro is fantastic. Help a reporter out.
Mhm.
It's a website you can sign up for, where if you have an expertise, you can offer it to popular magazines and stuff. And it's a way I got a lot of visibility. And it's really super simple to do. But I think doing that kind of public kind of visibility stuff was what got me my book. And so I didn't pitch my book to my publisher. My publisher pitched me. My publisher reached out to me and said, "I see you're talking about this stuff publicly and you're writing, and I think we're thinking about writing a book on imposter syndrome. I think you would be fantastic at it."
Awesome.
And so and that it brought me opportunity. And I think it's important to remember that it's not always we often think with our business ideas or expertise, we have to go chase them all the time. And if you kind of put yourself out publicly in certain ways, people come to you. And with our publisher, we were given free reign, even though it was their idea to kind of do this book on imposter syndrome. We had been talking about it, so we've been thinking about it, and they let us do what we want. And we got to construct a book that was authentic to who we were, what we believed in. So it's important as you put your message out there to recognize that people will see it, and opportunity comes from it. And I think it's really, the visibility can be hard for us. A lot of us don't go into PhDs to become stars or like Insta famous or whatever. But it can be helpful to actually execute the things you want to do, to give trainings, to give talks, to write a book, to do all of these things. It can give a lot of opportunity. I've gotten a lot of really cool opportunities from it.
Yeah. And a lot of people just have to understand that there's a lot of things that we don't like about being out there and being visible and being present. But one of the things that I found so many PhDs, so many doctoral candidates or students, they do this because they want to help other people in some way. They're called to serve some people and help solve some sort of problem. And the way that you can do that is by getting out there and being visible. It's not about you, it's about helping those other people. And for some people, that paradigm shift, that flips things for them, and they can really it really resonates at that point.
Yeah,
to get out there and do it
and build community. Like that's what, instead of thinking about audience building, thinking about community building.
Yeah.
I think also too, one of the things that was helpful for me is that I stopped trying to be perfect. I think in our doctoral programs,
Absolutely.
we oftentimes get pushed to be perfect. Every T has to be crossed, every I dotted. So we get very anal and like, kind of rigid in the way that we present, or, and I think I just learned to kind of just be like, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to say, I'm going to say, I'm going to like tell an incomplete story, and it's just going to be okay, and just really be human.
And that's another bell I try to ring with our folks all the time, is if you try to be perfect, you're never going to be prolific, first of all, because you're not going to get things out the door. But also it comes down to that authenticity thing, that if you're polishing everything that you produce and making it perfect, then when someone actually meets you, you're going to have all these people that expect perfection, and they look at you and they're like, oh, you got like a little thing with your makeup, or a little thing with your hair, or you said you don't want those people. You want people that resonate with you and who you are. And when you say they're okay with that, because they love what you're giving them, and they can accept you because you're helping them. And that's something.
Like, don't do it perfectly. You will waste time trying to be perfect. Just really enjoy the process, learn from it, kind of consider it iterative,
Now, I know we've got to wrap up fairly soon, very busy here, but I wanted you to talk for just a couple of minutes about Instagram. I know you mentioned that was a huge boon for your practice.
Yeah, we built I built my Instagram page largely thinking about the book. Is like, we have to have a place where we can talk about the book, like people can get to know about the book. LinkedIn was a harder platform for that, and so we thought we'd work on an Instagram page and talking about imposter syndrome. My book's about imposter syndrome.
Right.
And so we started kind of small, and really started doing a lot of digging and reading and learning about the platform of Instagram and the algorithm and how it works. And it really was a fun process where we kind of dug in to kind of understand it, and tried and experimented with things, and really built a decent sized audience on Instagram. And I've learned a lot over the process. I've really built a lovely community. It's really been, people on my page really want to talk about imposter syndrome and think about how to work on it. I think when I entered the process, I did a lot of benchmarking of other people who were similar to me, and seeing what I liked and didn't like about their way that they showed up on Insta. And I think, for me, then I decided I wanted certain things. For me personally, I wanted a place where people felt like they could be proactive. Like, I didn't want you to feel victimized by your imposter syndrome. I wanted you to talk about what you were going to do next to kind of move it forward. So I very purposefully, think about that as the way that I then produce content, is like about action and movement and learning, as opposed to, this is what happened to me this week. I didn't want that. And so I really was very purposeful, and a lot of really fun things came. I've talked to really cool people on it. Like, it's, in terms of I do lives, and, I do IGTVs. I experimented with every different aspect of the platform. And so it's really been a lot of fun, and a lot of amazing, I've done a cool talks from it. Like, people have reached out to me from universities, from newspapers, from all these kinds of places to do talks with them. And so it's really been amazing in terms of generating that expert like visibility. And I know a lot of people say the expert influencer is dead. I don't think so. I think like maybe the bikini clad influencer may be dead. Like those kinds of influencers may be moving their way on, but I think the expert influencer is just beginning. And I think there are a lot of really great opportunities for academics to become influencers on this and teach people what they know and spread the word in a much more like accessible way to their content. So
it's, again, being out there, opportunities multiply when you're out there. So you gotta get out there, and Instagram's a great way to do it. Even if you're an expert.
Yes.
You don't have to be, as you said, a bikini clad.
Yes. No, you do not.
Whatever.
And don't do it. Don't be tempted to do it. I see a lot of my colleagues like in bikini. It's like, no, that's not the influencer. We're the intellectual influencer. We are not the bikini influencer. Like, don't do that.
It's all about intentionality. You have to be authentic. You have to draw people in. If that is who you are.
Yeah, if that's who you are.
If you are doing Socrates at the beach, more power to you.
Right ahead. Yeah, but if it's not, don't do it. It's not going to draw more people to you that you want actually following you. It's going to draw things that are problematic for you. And so I think if, draw because it works. And I did have to play a lot with my content. I did have to think about ways people wanted it seen, wanted it heard. I had to play a lot with it and really learn, but it's been a fun process.
Yeah. Well, I know that you have, that your time is short, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here with us. Tell everybody the book. I want to make sure that we're going to get that on our blog page in the show notes. So if folks want to get there, we'll have a link. But tell everybody about the book, the TEDx talk, and how to get in touch with you if they want to reach out later on.
Sure. So the book is called Own Your Greatness, Overcome Impostor Syndrome, Beat Self-Doubt, and Succeed in Life. It's a workbook. It's meant to actually do the tasks of getting through your imposter syndrome. And we actually have a companion course masterclass that goes along with it, where Return and I teach it. And you can learn more about that on my Instagram page. My Insta is probably the easiest place. You can follow me on LinkedIn and stuff like that, but Insta is probably the easiest place to interact with me.
And then at Dr. Orbé-Austin, is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And then I have a TED talk on imposter syndrome. It talks about my experience of imposter syndrome and then how it shifted. And that's called the Imposter Syndrome Paradox. And
we're going to link that in our show notes too.
Yeah, and come join me. I love talking about imposter syndrome and like chatting. So, feel free to interact with me. I'm pretty open. So
that is so awesome, Dr. Orbé-Austin. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
You're so welcome. It was a joy.
I'll just remind everybody that today's episode has been brought to you by Dissertation Done. So if you're an adult doctoral student working on your dissertation and you need a little bit of help, support, and guidance and structure to get through the process, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/done. And if you're in this expert space and dealing with some of the things that Dr. Orbé-Austin was talking about today, and you want to expand your authority, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/book. Not only are we helping people become published authors, but we're doing lots of other interesting things there. That's just the first thing we like to do, is make sure you have that book out there. But reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/book, and we'll help you to expand your authority. Dr. Orbé-Austin, again, thank you so much. I had a wonderful time.
Yeah, it was a joy. I really had a good time.
And to everyone else, go out and live your unconventional life. Have a great day.
This has been An Unconventional Life. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe now to keep getting inspirational stories of unconventional lives as soon as they're released. Until then, go out and live your best unconventional life.